Does anyone know what that is, actually?
Lighter fluid.
Yes. So, yeah, lighter fluid. It's not because I wanted to, fill up my Zippo and light another spliff. Well, it could have been that. But it was because in the old days, before computers, everyone had a tin of that on their artwork desk. Because you cleaned off your artwork with it. This is in the days with bromides, PMTs. No, it's not a women's thing. Photomechanical transfer. No, you're all going hazy. Yes,
Iris
design. Older people in the house. Even John, maybe you remember this. From the 60s to until the birth of the digital revolution. So, this was a tin of something that sat on your desk and you used it to clean the artwork down. And in my early days as a graphic designer, what could I have as my symbol, as my logo? This was the choice. My career as a plagiarist started. Then, this is me in my shed, by the way. This is where I work. I notice you've got a little shed out there. I actually work in a proper shed. It's an 8x10 shed. It wasn't bought at B&Q, but it was bought somewhere else. But that's where I spend my days. I haven't always had a shed. I've had studios all over the place. I used to have a studio in Hoxton. It's quite trendy now, isn't it, Hoxton? When I was in Hoxton, there was one cafe that closed at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, one pub that was very dodgy to go into, and if you walked around at night, there was a good chance you were going to get bugged. But yeah, that's where I work. Got all my bits around me. Got my camo, got my skateboards, got my computer, got my sofa, and generally it's shitty because it's small. I haven't got enough space to do things, and the garden also works as an extra studio. It's quite funny actually that we've had some talk tonight of the internet and computers and the digital revolution. Because when I was at college in 1986, my last year of college in 1986 at Manchester Poly, one of the tutors bought one of these machines called an Apple Macintosh. It was a Mac Plus. And the first disk drive you put in was the system drive, so that powered the system. And then the additional drive, which is the little box to the right, was your software. So you put your software in there. We only had 2 bits of software. One was Mac Paint, and I think the other one was Word. It wasn't even Word. It was something like that that you could type on. And a Mac Paint was the first graphics software ever invented for a usable computer. Before you had a Quantel paint box, which was loads of money, and we had one of those as well at Manchester Poly, but you couldn't do anything with it, it was useless. When this thing came along, they had put it in a little room, and you had to sign yourself in, or I got signed in for 2 hours. I signed myself in for as many hours as I could, for every day possible. And there was me and one other guy in there going, wow, this is amazing. And all the other students going, computer, what's that all about? And anyway, you could produce this type on it. I mean, that's supposed to be, Gil Sans or something. But everything came out bitmapped because you had this thing called a Thunder Writer, that could only print out bitmap. But we loved it, And so that's my philosophical point for the evening. Is it the beginning or is it the end? Because it's the beginning of a new digital revolution, but it's the end of the analog, conventional way. I have adopted the digital domain, but I still think in the old ways. I.e., this was the bit of typography. We used to draw everything on blue graph paper with roaching pens. And in them days it was Stabilos. Sharpies didn't exist, but Stabilos. So I used to draw up lots of hand-drawn type. And it was this hand-drawn type that attracted the attention of Mr. Neville Brody. Anybody know about Neville Brody? One chap.
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
3.
Yeah.
He was the designer of
Mr. Neville Brody was the graphic designer of the and revolutionised graphic design as we know it in the 1980s. You've got to Google Neville Brody. He came up to do a lecture. Manchester Poly. wrote his number down on a bit of paper, come and work at Face magazine, okay. Rang him, no answer. Get through to his assistant, oh, he's in a meeting, you know, usual story. I'd pretty much given up, and it was one Friday evening at 7 o'clock. I thought, I'll just give him one last call, you know, picked up the phone, called it. Oh yeah, Ian, yeah, cool. Yeah, can you come down next week and start work? I was like, okay. So I packed my bag, packed my rucksack with a few clothes. I think I had 20 quid in my pocket. I just about put my degree show up by that point, and I had to ring my sister and said, when the degree show's finished, can you take it down and can you store all my stuff in your garage, because she's quite a lot older than me, my sister. I'm going to London. Okay. So I got on a train down to London, and I went to live in a squat in Clapham, because my mate was at St Martin's, and he lived in a squat, which I did for a couple of years, because I only worked a couple of weeks out of the month, and the pay at the face was right, so I didn't have any money. So anyway, 1987, my mate Dave, who I'm squatting with, goes to Paris on a field trip, and he comes back raving about all this stencil graffiti. Black Lorraine, now what we know as Black Lorraine, but there was a whole movement in Paris in those days based on stencil graffiti, and he came back absolutely raving about it. And so we cut out these two stencils, mine's on the left, his is on the right, and we sprayed it on the stairwell going up to our squat, and that was 1987. Before long, I'd finished at Brodie's and I started designing club flyers for the blossoming acid jazz scene. And I did a flyer a day or 3 a week or whatever it was for a couple of years, and I'd get paid 30 quid or 50 quid or I'd do it for free. And that was my staple diet for a couple of years until I started. Well, my staple diet for, along with record sleeves, probably about 4 or 5 years. And kind of in our scene, the jazz scene, pretty much single-handedly took on the look for that. I didn't know it at the time, but that was what I did. So everyone who wanted graphics, whether it be record sleeves or club flyers, or in this case a magazine, Straight No Chaser. Has anyone heard of Straight No Chaser?
Sample of one.
Very, very underground music magazine that started in 1989 and I think finished nearly 20 years later. And it was renowned for the fact that you couldn't find it in WX, you couldn't find it in magazine shops. If you bought it on subscription, great, but we built up a global following basically. And now I still get emails from people in every corner of the globe going, why isn't Straight No Chaser still here? Why isn't Straight No Chaser still here? Because it was and probably still is the Bible.
It was probably, you look at Tyler Brule, Monocle and blah blah blah. They were the first people who used different paper, art in the magazine, like way ahead of their time in terms of production and
it was the first mag to be produced on Apple.
Yeah, wallpaper basically copied Straight No Chaser. So I'll bring some in next week.
Yeah.
Absolute work of art as a magazine.
This was how we used to do it in the old days. It would be bromides or laser print stuck down. You'd write up the, this is proper old school. You'd mark up with a trace overlay, and you'd mark it up. So you'd tell the printer what you wanted, and you send it off. And we didn't have money for proofs, so when it came back printed, that was it. So if you'd made a mistake on what your markup, it came out wrong. That's thought-provoking.
Scary thought.
It came out wrong, and it often came out wrong. Sometimes those mistakes were good mistakes. Sometimes you learnt from those mistakes.
Yeah. Sometimes not.
Sometimes not. But also, you always did your best. I'm a Boy Scout. Still, do your best. Giles Peterson, got involved with him, Talking Loud Records. That was my first kind of proper job. It was in probably, I think it was 1992, that a young chap walked into the Straight No Chaser office, because by that point I had a basement studio, and the quote goes, we had one little skylight at the end with, a little bit of natural light, and the quote goes, we don't need natural light. We ain't got time for looking out the window. Because we were so busy down there, and I was so busy. I was working. One day I collapsed. I'd been working for 3 days solid, and I was just sitting at the computer. And I just collapsed and fell on the floor. And I went to bed, and 2 days later I woke up because I just worked so hard, and we partied hard as well. You know, if we weren't partying, we were working. And those days in the early 90s were still what I call the glory years. You know, it's just, there's no way I can relive those years now because I'm too old. But in them days, it was just fantastic. You know, I didn't have kids. I could just devote my life. And a young lad, 17-year-old by the name of James Naval, walked into the studio and said, "Yeah, I want to do a column for Straight No Chase. I want to call it Mo Wax, please." And he'd written this chart out, handwritten, in caps. And my missus, Janine, who's still my missus, was the typist. So she looked at the split copy and said, "It's all in caps. Do you want me to type it in caps?" "No, just type it normally. Just written it in caps, because that's the way he is." Well, push come to shove, he started a record label, and this year, Meltdown Festival at South Bank, it's 21 years of Mo Wax. So urban archaeology.
Is he curating it?
He's curating the Meltdown Festival this year at South Bank, yeah, which is a big deal. And so I've kind of revisited a lot of that, but these are the sleeves, and that was the label, the logo that I did for it. So. A little bit later, this was the first job that I sent off digital. So it was scanned in from old wood type. So we've got the analogue. Where's Ben? Is he still here?
I think he's probably busy down in Shoreditch.
He's gone. Could have learned something from this conversation. It's the analogue. This was the analogue. So you've got the wood type, you know, letterpress, which is now all the rage. But I've got a small letterpress collection, mainly pinched from St Martin's School of Art, but we're not going to that. Which I then put on one of these newfangled scanners that have just come out on the market, where you could scan in you could scan in a picture, and it would come up on your computer screen, and you could manipulate it in Photoshop, and then you could put other type over the top of it. It was absolutely fantastic. You could do it all on the computer. It was brilliant. You've got to put that in. I'm trying to put things into perspective for all you young people. At that time, then, that was revolutionary. That was like, wow. We can scan in a picture. We can have it on the computer screen. We can put type over the top of it and do things to that. It was mind blowing. So I think this was Photoshop 1 or 2 in action, and it was sent off on SiteQuest disk. So you had the floppy disk. Then after that you had SiteQuest disk, because obviously file sizes. You see, in the old days I used to have a rack of floppy disks, because all my artwork used to be stored on floppy disk. It was black and white, just black and white only. But then when we started scanning stuff, the file sizes started going up. So you needed to send your job off on either a 44 megabyte or an 88 megabyte SiteQuest drive. Okay, 44 megabytes data, and you would send that. Like in this instance, I would send that drive off to Japan by FedEx, and that SiteQuest drive had cost me £100. So you spent your life ringing old clients, "Can I have my SiteQuest drive back?" Because you worked out that you'd have £1,000 worth of SiteQuest drives in any one moment, all over the globe. Times have changed, haven't they? Foster's Ice. This is when I met John. John met my missus in the supermarket, didn't you? I think it was Waitrose in Ealing,
Yeah.
or Sainsbury's or something. Might have been Marks and Sparks, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And he said, "Okay, I want to speak to your bloke. I want to talk to him about graffiti on billboards." Okay. What transpired was the Foster's Ice campaign, 1995.
Bates.
What was the ad agency?
BMP.
BMP.
DDP.
DDP.
Adam and Eve.
Adam and Eve.
Whatever it is.
SWXYZ.
Something like that. It was BMP then. Yeah.
They were like those names, didn't they?
Oh.
I could never remember any of them. And they had some money left over. It was Courage, wasn't it? Courage Brewery had some money left over. And this dodgy drink was coming out called Foster's Ice. It was a shite beer, wasn't it?
Terrible.
Bloody terrible. And and he said, what we did was we booked, I think it was 8 billboards along Chalk Farm Road. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Booked 9 billboards on Chalk Farm Road that were all within close proximity of each other. And I went about kind of art directing, curating, whatever you want to call it, contacting these people to do a billboard. And we had quite a good budget, didn't we? Not in today's scheme of things, but them days it was great. I mean, I'd ring up some of these graffiti artists and say, I've got £1 for you, and they'd go, what? £1?
This was pre-Banksy.
Can I have £1?
Pre-Banksy, this was.
Well, I'll talk about him in a minute.
Yeah.
Futura 2000, who now is like mega, you can't believe his profile now. Does anyone know about Futura 2000 or Futura? He was one of the original graph artists from New York who used to spray on the trains, do all that. Because that's what I was influenced by. When I was at art college, the Subway art book came out and it was like, wow, graffiti in New York, wow. And you have pictures of Henry Chalfont, Martha Cooper, you know, all these brilliant photographers took pictures of this great stuff. And that really inspired me when I was at art college. And so through James Lavelle, funnily enough, James Lavelle started using Futura's artwork on all his record sleeves and stuff. Through him, I got him to do it. But his career had finished. I mean, he'd stopped doing graffiti and he went in the Navy. And he was a cycle courier. And when I rang him up and said, I want you to come over to London and spray a billboard, he was like, what? I haven't done that in 15, 20 years. It's like, okay. And when I gave him £1 in cash, it was like he was blown away. It was brilliant. And he did his billboard live. So he did some of them live. Some of them were done in this. We hired this big studio, this big place in King's Cross, and we went about creating these artworks. And it was a combination of hip graphic designers of the day, like Designers Republic, Cornell Windlin, who I used to work with at Neville Brody's, who now is a Swiss-based graphic designer. Dave Crow, who was my hero at Manchester. And then we went about finding graffiti artists, because it was in the days before the internet. These guys you couldn't find these guys. It was all word of mouth. Futura OK, top left. The 2 guys on the bottom were Scotland-based. The year after we took it national, and they were part of the Fallen Angels crew. Who my mate Fred, who started Lemon Jelly, he used to work for me. He said, I know these guys in Edinburgh called Fallen Angels, they're really good. We'll get them to do some. Kay's in Manchester, he was really hot. I mean, in Rusholme and Levenshulme, he was everywhere at the time, Kay's. You couldn't walk without Kay's being there. But in them days it was hard. You couldn't just Google search them. You had to really do your groundwork, and you had to speak to people, and you had to get to know people on the ground who said, oh, I know him, yeah. Because it was really underground. I mean, graffiti was a dirty word in those days, wasn't it, really? You couldn't involve graffiti in an advertising campaign, because the client would just turn around and go, but we can't do graffiti, it's illegal. You know, that was the state of play at the time. But to give, what was his name?
Oh,
No.
Foster's dude.
The Foster's guy.
Peter Harding.
Peter
You know,
Harding.
he's now like managing director of GlaxoSmithKline Beecham. He's got the most
He
serious
stuck his
job
neck
in the
out.
world.
He really stuck his neck out.
He put his cock on the block.
He did. That's what he said.
Sorry.
And anyway, push come to shove, it won a Media Week award, and Nike, who had 5 times the budget, came second, and we won it, didn't we? And it was amazing, wasn't it?
It was fun.
And that was my one and only foray into the advertising world. So yeah, another obviously thing, fonts is my thing, that's what drives me. This again was the mid-90s. I put out this little font package. It came on your font came on a floppy disk with a little fanzine. Not much good now, is it? More fonts. More fonts. If any of you are interested in the slightest, then go onto my website and have a little look at stuff. Title sequences for TV, got involved with various people who Smack the Pony, bottom left, was the first title sequence I ever did, which became a very, very popular and influential comedy sketch show, which they still repeat now. Peep Show, of course, blimey, I mean, how many series is that going to? Doing title sequences is alright, but the TV world's very demanding. I mean, one thing that I've always done is I've been staunchly independent, and if I don't like a client, then if they ring me again, I'm kind of like, do you know what? I might give it a miss, or I'm not quite sure about the way you go about things. And so I have got a reputation as being
Difficult.
But aren't graphic designers supposed to be difficult? Aren't you supposed to question?
Was that Oasis on that last one?
Yeah, Oasis.
Yeah.
Logos, of course. We talked about the Moax logo, but I've done tons of logos. Mainly a lot of record sleeves, but all sorts of people. I've done logos for skateboard brands, done logos for cosmetic companies, done logos for photographers, done logos for people who make rings. What else? Clubs. You name it. My thing is, it's all about fitting in as much as you can. How much can you pack into the day? How much stuff can you design for people? And over the years, it's in the hundreds of design, hundreds of record sleeves, design hundreds of logos for people, design hundreds of club flyers, particularly with Straight and the Chase and a couple of the magazines, design hundreds of magazines. And when you've been doing it nearly 30 years, it does blur into insignificance somewhat. It's just yesterday's news. You're only as good as your last title sequence. You're only as good as your last record sleeve. You're only as good as your last logo. People judge you on the last thing. And I try to say to people, well, don't judge me on anything. Just look at the work as a whole and see how prolific I am, and see how dedicated I am to the art of graphic design. I was a graphic artist before the term even existed. So now I've turned my hand to the commercial constraints of the graphic design industry are somewhat frustrating. So in the last few years, I've started just producing my own stuff. And now I exist in this world where I'm doing stuff for myself because that's my creative outlet, and that's how I can really truly express myself. And then I'm designing stuff in the commercial arena where people come to me for a job, but I find that it works the other way around as well. People now come to me because they want this rather than me answering a brief. So I think that's how the term graphic artist kind of comes about, in a funny kind of way. And tomorrow is the opening of a show in Hackney Wick of my latest works, which
We can all come to
all
it
the
for
most
free
me.
beer.
It's the most me, I think,
Flies here.
because it's typography, it's graphics, it's art, it's the analog meeting the digital. It's the Luddite attitude. It's all those things that I believe in. Yeah, okay, it's a little bit retro. But me producing this stuff in my garden, in my studio, that's what makes me happy now. And I think that's probably sums me up in. That does sum me up in one word, really. I've been very happy doing what I've been doing. It's never felt like a job. I've always really enjoyed it. I've always felt like it was my hobby, but I've managed to make money out of it.
Is it fair to say, Swifty, we're going to have a permanent bit of Swifty art and reception, which you can plug your iTunes into and pump the
Yeah, you
music
plug
up?
your iPod into it.
That is going in as of next
And
week.
like Ben said, it is solid state, but I have got other stuff that's valve, so it mixes the digital with the analog, and that's very much what I'm about. And so, if any of you haven't got anything to do tomorrow night, then head yourself. There's a load of invites, flyers on the bar. Get yourselves over to Hackney Wick because there'll be some beers and apparently they put on very nice nibbles. So that's it. This sums me up. Piss artist and plagiarist. I died last year. Thank you very much.